Hello students. So today we are starting with a new topic, that is insulin. We shall be taking this topic in 3 sessions. So today we shall be having the first part. In this topic, in today's session, we shall be discussing about the insulin synthesis, insulin actions, and insulin mechanism of action. So all these aspects you have studied very elaborately in your first year classes. So today's session is more of a revision for you, and I'll be concentrating on certain aspects which are important from the pharmacological point of view. So before we go into the insulin as such, we shall have a brief introduction to the disorder or the disease, that is diabetes. So all of you know diabetes is a chronic medical condition. It can last almost a lifetime, and it is predicted to become the leading cause of morbidity and death in the coming decade. So you can have a look at the statistics that I have given here. So it says that diabetes is considered as a pandemic. So we already are dealing with one of the pandemics, that is COVID. But this is one of the pandemics with which we have been living with for so many ages. You can see here around 425 million people are living with diabetes, and this figure is supposed to be going to 522 million by the end of 2020. And you can see here that around 1 in 2 persons with diabetes is still remaining undiagnosed. So diabetes mellitus is a metabolic disorder which is characterized by hyperglycemia. The characteristic features are a fasting blood glucose level of more than or equal to 126 milligram per deciliter, and or the other criteria is a glucose level of blood sugar level of more than or equal to 200 milligram per deciliter 2 hours after ingesting 75 grams of glucose orally. The other characteristic feature is glycosuria, that is the presence of sugar in the urine. So we normally do not have the sugar in the present in the urine. This is an abnormal feature seen in diabetics. It's associated with hyperlipidemia, negative nitrogen balance, and occasionally with ketonemia. So all these are occurring because of an altered metabolism of not only carbohydrates but also lipids and proteins. So often when we describe about diabetes, we only refer or think about carbohydrates, but you have to remember that the metabolism of lipids and proteins is also altered in diabetes mellitus. So why are we so concerned about the diabetes? Because it has got long-term complications which include mainly microvascular and macrovascular complications like early atherosclerosis, sclerosis of glomerular capillaries, retinopathy, neuropathy, peripheral vascular insufficiency, and it can lead to stroke, coronary artery disease in the long run. And why does these vascular complications occur? These are occurring mainly because of the thickening of the basement membrane of the capillaries, because of the proliferation of the protein matrix, and all this is occurring because of the glycosylation of the protein, because of the excess glucose that is present in the body, and also because of the presence of a large amount of sorbitol. Sorbitol, all of you know, it's a reduced product of glucose. So these are the reasons why all these vascular pathology occurs in diabetics. Now, how is diabetes classified? So currently it is classified as type 1 diabetes, otherwise called as the insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus, IDDM, or the juvenile onset diabetes mellitus. It is relatively a rare form of diabetes as compared to the other forms that we're going to study now. It affects nearly 10% of diabetic patients. And here the main pathology is the beta cell destruction. And beta cell destruction can either be autoimmune reason or because of some idiopathic reason. So in the case where it is an autoimmune etiology, there are autoantibodies which are present against the beta cells, and that type of diabetes is called as the type 1 A, and the other one, that is idiopathic, is called as the type 1B. And because of the destruction of the beta cells, there is an absolute deficiency of insulin. That is, there is no insulin. So in such patients, the ketosis is more commonly seen. So the therapy for such patients is insulin. You cannot have any other modality in this patient because the deficiency is absolute. The next one is type 2 diabetes or non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, NIDDM, or the maturity onset diabetes mellitus. So the previous one, that is type 1 diabetes, is more of a, it occurs or starts at a juvenile or a younger age, but the other one is more of a maturity onset diabetes mellitus. It is more common one, affects nearly 90% of all patients, and it is usually associated with a genetic tendency. And what is the reason for, or what is the cause for this type 2 diabetes? It occurs because of the impaired insulin secretion. Okay, so usually there is no destruction of beta cells, or they may be just moderate destruction, and the insulin levels may be low, maybe normal, or sometimes it may be even high. So there is no, not the absolute deficiency of insulin, just like we saw in the type 1. There might be a slight impairment in the insulin secretion, which can eventually progress to beta cell failure. The major feature here is that there is a reduced sensitivity of the peripheral tissues like liver, muscle, and fat to insulin. So you have studied in your previous classes that insulin acts on liver, muscle, and fat. So these organs, these pet tissues become less sensitive, or the receptors on which the insulin acts on these, which are present on these tissues, they become less in number. There is down regulation of these receptors, and hence the sensitivity of these tissues to insulin is reduced, and this is otherwise termed as the insulin resistance. So what happens here is that the insulin levels may be normal, but the peripheral tissues are not responding, or they are not sensitive to the action of the insulin. Or there might be a situation where there is an excess of hyperglycemic hormones like the excess of glucagon, and this can cause a relative insulin deficiency. The relative insulin deficiency means that the insulin levels are normal, but there is so much of glucose that is being produced by, because of the action of the excess glucagon, that the amount of insulin that is present in the body appears to be relatively less. So the other specific types than type 1 and type 2 are the maturity onset diabetes of youth, that is MODY, and it is occurring because of genetic defects occurring in the glucokinase gene. Then others are the diabetes occurring because of certain endocrinopathies, a drug or chemical induced forms. So corticosteroids, for example, they can lead to, result in a diabetic state. Post-pancreatectomy patients, they can have a diabetes-like picture. Similarly, the diabetes or the hyperglycemia, which manifests in the second trimester of pregnancy, is called as the gestational diabetes mellitus. It's otherwise called as a type 4 diabetes mellitus also. So the three basic pathophysiological abnormalities which you should remember that occurs in diabetes is either an impaired insulin secretion, which can be absolute in the case of type 1, or it can be just moderate as in the case of type 2. And excessive hepatic glucose production because of the excessive action of glucagon like hormones that occurs only in type 2, and the insulin resistance, where the peripheral tissues are less sensitive to the actions of the insulin, that occurs mainly in the type 2. So in type 1, there is only the problem mainly is with the insulin secretion, whereas in type 2 insulin secretion can be affected, but at the other hand, the major features are insulin resistance and excessive hepatic glucose production. Then the common symptoms are frequent urination, or otherwise called as polyuria, polydipsia or excessive thirst, polyphagia or excessive hunger, unexplained weight loss, increased fatigue, blurred vision if complications like retinopathy have occurred. So blurred vision can be a presenting feature. Slow healing ulcers or sores, that is also one of the commonest presentations of diabetes. Frequent infections, dry itchy skin, numbness or tingling in hands or feet, that is mainly when the nerves are affected, that is neuropathy sets in. Red, swollen or tender gums, gingivitis, all these can be presenting features or can be features suggesting complications of diabetes. Now, what are the treatment modalities that are available for diabetes? So, there are certain non-pharmacological measures like diet restriction and diet control, a proper exercise, and weight reduction. But these are only done. This can only be done. This has to be done throughout the management of diabetes. But if the levels are very high, the glucose levels are high, these alone will not be sufficient. You have to go for pharmacological measures, which include both insulin and oral hypoglycemic drugs. So we are today going to deal with the first modality of management of diabetes, that is insulin. So insulin we shall be discussing mainly under the discovery of insulin, then the regulation of secretion, the actions, and the mechanism of action. So insulin was discovered in 1921 in the University of Toronto by the physician, that is Frederick Banting, and his student Charles Best. And there were other associates also, that is Professor of Physiology MacLeod and a biochemist called Collip. And they had demonstrated the hypoglycemic action of an extract of pancreas, which was prepared after degeneration of the exocrine part by ligation of the pancreatic duct. And they had done this experiment in a dog called Marjorie. So I'll show you the picture of these in the next slide. 14-year-old Leonard Thompson, he was the first patient on whom insulin therapy was used. And in 1923, Banting and MacLeod, they won the Nobel Prize in Medicine and Physiology, respectively. Insulin was obtained in pure crystalline form in 1926, and the chemical structure of insulin was worked out in 1956 by Sanger. So this is Banting and Best. This is Banting, and the Best is a student. And you can see the dog, Marjorie. And you can see here, this is Leonard Thompson. And before the discovery of insulin, the patients who were supposedly be very young patients, they died within weeks to years of its onset. But you can see the difference that has occurred. This was Leonard before the insulin therapy, and this is the same person after insulin therapy. That is about 2 months later. You can see the person, how he looks. Then we go to the chemistry of insulin. So insulin has it's a two-chain polypeptide having 51 amino acids and a molecular weight of 6,000. We have already studied the structure in detail in your biochemistry classes. You know, it has got A chain, which has got 21 amino acid, and B chain that is having 30 amino acids. Total we have got 51 amino acids, and the A and the B chains are held together by the disulfide bonds. So when you compare the human pork and beef insulin, you can see that they are differing in some of the amino acids. You can see here human and the pork, they are more homologous because they are differing only in one amino acid at the 30th position in the B chain. Whereas you can see beef insulin, it is differing from the human insulin in 3 amino acids at 3 different sites. So pork insulin is more homologous to the human insulin. Now, how is it synthesized? Again, this also you have studied elaborately in biochemistry. So this is just a revision. So it is insulin is produced by the beta cells of pancreatic islets as a single chain 86 amino acid precursor polypeptide that is called as the pre-pro insulin, and that is so once again, there's a small mistake in this. It is produced by the beta cells or pancreatic beta cells of the a single chain polypeptide having 110 amino acids. This is a mistake here. It is not 86 amino acids, 110 amino acids. And the subsequent proteolytic processing removes 24 amino acids to produce proinsulin. So first you have got pre-proinsulin, that is 110 amino acids, and 24 amino acids are removed from it to produce proinsulin. Then After that, 35 residue fragment that is removed from the proinsulin, and this will generate the C-peptide. That 35 residue fragment is a C-peptide, and then you have got the insulin molecule, which has got the A chain and the B chain with 21 amino acids and 30 amino acids respectively, connected by the disulfide bonds. So the mature insulin molecule and the C-peptide are always stored together, and they are secreted also from the granules together. So you can see here the process again. Here you can see pre-pro insulin that is having 110 amino acids, and from that 24 amino acids are cleaved out, and you get the pro insulin. And from that you the 35 amino acid C chain is removed, and you get this insulin which is having A chain and the B chain with 21 and 30 amino acids respectively, which are connected through the disulfide bonds. Now let us look at the regulation of insulin secretion. So the two terminologies that you have to remember here is the basal secretion of insulin, which is occurring throughout the day at the rate of 1 unit per hour. And larger quantities of insulin is secreted post meals, and that is called as the bolus secretion. So you have a basal secretion which is occurring throughout the day, and you have certain highs in the secretion of insulin after meal time. So there is a bolus secretion after the breakfast, after the lunch, and after the dinner. That is called as the basal bolus secretion of insulin. Now, what are the regulators of insulin secretion? So first we'll see the chemical regulators of insulin secretion. So here glucose is the key regulator of insulin secretion. The other mediators are amino acids, fatty acids, and ketone bodies. They also regulate insulin secretion, but the key regulator is glucose. So what does glucose do? The glucose stimulates the insulin secretion through a series of steps, which we are going to discuss. So glucose is transported into the beta cell by the GLUT1 glucose transporter, and this will result in the production of ATP. This causes an inhibition of ATP-sensitive potassium channels. This in turn leads to partial depolarization of beta cells, leading to increased intracellular calcium levels, and further leading to the exocytotic release of insulin from the granules. This is the process by which the insulin is released or secreted from the beta cells whenever there is a surge in the glucose levels in the body. This is the way insulin is secreted from the granules. So these steps are very important because later on you will be studying about certain drugs called as secretagogues. Okay, and then also you will see that this is the same method by which they will act on the beta cells and result in the secretion of insulin. So these steps you can remember it now itself. And another thing is called as the incretin effect. So what is this incretin effect? So this is the fact that glucose will be more effective in releasing insulin from the beta cells when it is given orally than when it is given IV. And this occurs by generating certain chemical signals from the gut. So these are called as the, and these chemical signals are called as the incretins. So you can have some examples of incretins, that is glucagon-like peptide, GLP, glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide, GIP, vasoactive intestinal peptide, VIP. These are some of the examples of incretins. So just remember GLP and GIP, especially GLP you have to remember because you will have a reference to this later on in the chapter when you're going to study about the oral hypoglycemic drugs. So what is incretin effect? It is the effect that it is the aspect that glucose is more effective in releasing insulin when it is given orally than when it is given IV. And this it is doing by generating some chemical signals from the gut which are called as incretins, which act on the beta cells to release the insulin from the beta cells. Now, the hormonal regulators, there are a number of hormones which regulate the release of insulin, but the major influence is on its release is mainly by the intra pancreatic hormones. So you already know glucagon is produced from the alpha cells of pancreas and somatostatin is produced from the delta cells. So glucagon increases the synthesis of insulin, whereas somatostatin decreases the decreases the release of insulin. So these three hormones, insulin, glucagon, somatostatin, work together and they maintain a kind of a coordinated effect, and a balance is there. Okay, then we have got the neural mediators or neural regulators. So the stimulation of the adrenergic alpha 2 receptors, that is the major influence on the insulin um, secretion. And you can see it decreases the insulin secretion by inhibiting the beta cell adenyl cyclase. Beta 2, on the other hand, only has a minor effect on the insulin secretion, and it increases the secretion by stimulating the beta cell adenyl cyclase. Cholinergic receptors, when they are stimulated, they increase the insulin secretion through an IP3-DAG, increase calcium in the beta cells. So the major effect of the adrenergic system is through alpha 2, which decreases the synthesis, the release of insulin, and the cholinergic one, on the other hand, increases the insulin secretion. Now let us look at the actions of insulin. So we shall divide the actions of insulin under the following headings, that is rapid actions, which include mainly the metabolic actions, intermediate actions, and the actions like DNA mediated synthesis of GLUT4 transporter by insulin, and the long-term actions, which include mainly multiplication and differentiation of many cells. So first we shall look at the rapid actions, that is the metabolic actions of insulin. So here you have to remember one thing, that the overall effect of insulin are to dispose the meal derived glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, and to favor the storage of the fuel. And it is a major anabolic hormone, and it promotes the synthesis of glycogen, lipids, and proteins. So just remember, it is an anabolic hormone and promotes the synthesis of glycogen, lipids, and proteins. So what does it do to the blood glucose level? So it is going to decrease the blood glucose level by the following process. It inhibits the glycogenolysis in the liver by degrading glycogen phosphorylase. All these enzymes you have studied earlier also in your biochemistry classes. This is again a repetition. Inhibits the gluconeogenesis in the liver from the glycerol, fatty acids, amino acids. You already know these are the raw materials for the gluconeogenesis. This is also inhibited by the decreased synthesis of the enzyme, that is phosphoenol pyruvate. It stimulates the glycogen synthesis from the glucose in the liver, fat, muscle by stimulating the glycogen synthesis. So and also increases the glucose utilization by production of glucokinase. So the overall effect is to dispose the meal-derived glucose and to increase the glycogen stores. Next one, it decreases the blood amino acid level and increases the protein synthesis. It increases the amino acid uptake by target cell and also decreases the protein breakdown. Now, so what happens in a diabetic patient? So whenever it's an insulin deficiency, it leads to protein breakdown. As a result, what happens? Amino acids are released into the blood, and these are taken up by the liver and converted to pyruvate, glucose, and urea. The excess urea which is produced is excreted in the urine, resulting in negative nitrogen balance. Thus, catabolism takes the upper hand over anabolism in the diabetic state. So it is the anabolic hormone, but in the diabetic state, catabolism takes an upper hand because these processes are not occurring. Then you have got the actions on the fat metabolism. So it decreases the free fatty acid levels in the blood. It decreases lipolysis, increases the lipogenesis, decreases the blood ketone bodies, and increases the clearance of VLDL and chylomicrons. Now what happens in diabetes? In diabetes, increased amount of fat is broken down because of the unchecked action of the other lipolytic hormones. So what will happen? Increased free fatty acid and glycerol is occurring in the blood, and this is taken up by the liver to produce acetyl coenzyme A. Normally, the acetyl coenzyme A is synthesized to fatty acids and triglycerides, but this process is now reduced in diabetics, and the acetyl coenzyme A will be diverted to produce ketone bodies, And usually the ketone bodies released in the blood are taken up by the are partly taken up by the muscle and the heart as energy source. But when these ketone bodies are in increased amounts, the capacity of the muscle and the heart to take them off is exceeded. Ketonemia will occur, and ketonemia and the ketonuria can result. So this is how the ketonemia and ketonuria occurs in the diabetic patient. Now, the last bit is the mechanism of action of insulin. So, this you have to remember the characteristic of the receptor and the processes that are involved in bringing about the various actions of the insulin. So, insulin acts on the receptors which are present on almost all the cells. Principally, they are seen on the liver cells, fat cells mainly. So, this receptor is a tyrosine kinase receptor, which is located on the cell membrane. Again, the characteristic feature of these receptor you have studied in your general pharmacology classes. So, you have to apply the same thing here. So these receptors, they consist of two extracellular alpha subunit and two transmembrane beta subunits, which are linked by disulfide bonds. And it has A has the insulin, the alpha subunit has the insulin binding site, and the beta subunit has the protein kinase activity. So I'll show you the figure here. It has got alpha subunit and it has got the beta subunit, and you can see here the alpha subunit is the insulin binding has the insulin binding site, and the beta subunit has the tyrosine kinase activity. Now what happens? What is the process that is involved? So whenever the insulin binds to the alpha subunit, it aggregates and the receptor is internalized along with the insulin. Now, the tyrosine kinase activity on the beta subunit of the receptor is increased, which causes the autophosphorylation of the tyrosine residues on each other. I'll show you the figure, you'll understand it better. And this further leads to the phosphorylation of insulin receptor substrate proteins like IRS1 and 2. This sets in a cascade of phosphorylation and dephosphorylation reactions, which are mediated through mainly phosphatidyl inositol 3 kinase, PI3, and the other kinases also. This leads to stimulation or inhibitions of enzymes, and result depending on the stimulation or inhibition, you can have will have the rapid metabolic actions of the insulin. So this again we'll see through one of the figure. So you can see this is the receptor. So once the insulin is binding to the receptor, you can see that the receptor is internalized, and this autophosphorylation of the tyrosine kinase, tyrosine residues on the receptor. It will cause phosphorylation of the IRS, insulin receptor substrate proteins, and this will again lead to a cascade of phosphorylation reactions involving the PI3 kinase, and this will lead to activation or inhibition of enzymes, and we'll have the respective actions or the metabolic actions will be produced. So this is about how the rapid or the metabolic actions are produced. So we also studied about the intermediate actions, that is the translocation or the production of the GLUT4 transporter. So this we are not going to study in elaborately. We are mainly at the undergraduate level. You have to mainly know the mechanism of action of the metabolic actions of insulin. But this is just an additional for the completion sake of the mechanism of action I'm going to say about this. So insulin is also involved in the translocation of the GLUT4 from the cytoplasm to the plasma membrane, and it is mainly mediated through the actions of second messengers like PIP3, and there are other genes also which probably play a role in the translocation of GLUT4 to the plasma membrane. The long-term effects of insulin, which we said is the proliferation of the cells and multiplication and proliferation of cells, are exerted by generation of transcription factors. You can see generation of transcription factors, which in turn promote the proliferation and differentiation of various cells. So the actions are mainly the rapid actions, that is metabolic actions, which are mediated through the cascade that involves the IRS and the PI3. Then you have got the intermediate actions, that is GLUT4 translocation to the plasma membrane, which is mediated through second messengers like PIP3, and long-term effects like the proliferation and the differentiation, which are mediated through the transcription factors. This is about the mechanism of action. So we shall continue with the remaining part of the topic in the next class. This is only the introduction. When you come to pharmacology, when you are dealing with pharmacology, the next two sessions will be more important. This is actually a revision of the first year session. So I want you all of you to write these as in your as notes in your notebook, and also you have got one homework, that is you have to write the actions of insulin on the liver, muscle, and adipose tissue. So I have described the actions as the action on the lipid metabolism, on the carbohydrate metabolism, and the protein metabolism. So what I want you to write is the actions of the insulin on liver, muscle, and adipose tissue. You can write in a tabular form, making 3 columns and writing the actions under each of the organ. This will be your homework, and I'll be discussing this in your next class. Thank you.